In the final week of his life, Jesus walked toward a tree with purpose. What happened next would leave scholars puzzled for 2,000 years. He had healed the sick, touched the untouchable, forgiven the broken. But on this morning, something different moved behind those knowing eyes. He had given sight to the blind with nothing but a word and a touch. He had restored the leper that no one else would dare to approach. Now he stood before a fig tree, and everything was about to change. He raised his hand, not in blessing, but in a curse that shook creation. From the roots upward, death traveled silently through every vein of the tree. By morning, the branches were skeletal, stripped of every leaf and sign of life. The disciples stared in silence, unable to explain what they had just witnessed. Was this the Prince of Peace, the man who preached love and forgiveness? Why would the embodiment of grace destroy something as innocent as a tree? Most people skip this story because it does not fit the gentle Jesus narrative. But once you unlock this mystery, you will never read the Gospels the same way. To understand what Jesus did, you must first understand the science of the fig. In ancient Israel, the fig tree follows a very specific and predictable biological rhythm. Before the leaves appear, the tree produces a small early fruit bud called pagam. Leaves come after the buds, always. That is the natural order of the fig. From a distance, a fully leafed tree signals one powerful message to every traveler. A hungry traveler sees those leaves and believes, there is fruit. There is provision here. Mark records one devastating detail: it was not the season for figs that day. So why curse a tree for lacking fruit when it was not even fig season? Because the tree was not simply empty, it was actively broadcasting a lie to the world. An honest dormant tree makes no promise. This tree was fully dressed for harvest. Jesus walked closer, parted the branches, and examined what the leaves had promised. What he found was not disappointment, it was grief at what had been wasted. The tree wore the costume of fruitfulness while housing nothing but hollow performance inside. The pagam bud is the one thing that cannot be faked, it is evidence of real life. A tree in full leaf with no pagam is not struggling. It is lying to your face. Jesus turned away from the tree, not in anger, but in prophetic sorrow and resolve. What matters most is never what you can see from a comfortable, safe distance. The calendar said one thing, the tree said another. Only one of them was telling the truth. Every ancient farmer in Israel knew this rhythm by instinct, passed down through generations. The verdict was delivered quietly. The tree had made its claim. Now it would answer for it. 40 years before its destruction, Jerusalem's temple gleamed like a crown on the hillside. The Gospel of Mark is not just a record, it is a masterwork of deliberate literary structure. Mark places the fig tree, then the temple, then the fig tree again, a deliberate sandwich. Jesus entered Jerusalem to the sound of celebration, palm branches waving on every side. From the outside, the temple was breathtaking, every stone a declaration of devoted faith. Pilgrims traveled weeks to stand before those walls and feel the presence of the holy. Jesus stepped through the threshold, and the contrast between outside and inside was devastating. Where prayer should have lived, he found merchants. Where worship belonged, he found commerce. Tables overturned, coins scattered across the sacred stones in every direction at once. In that single moment, gold meant nothing and the market's noise became a confession of guilt. The doves burst free, grace released from a system that had made even worship transactional. The priests stood in their robes performing the religion while missing everything that mattered. The temple looked magnificent from across the valley, leafy, full, and alive with activity. The fig tree had leaves. The temple had robes. Both were hollow where it actually counted. Jesus was not having a reaction. He was enacting a prophecy timed to the decade. 40 years later, Roman legions appeared on the hills surrounding the city of Jerusalem. The temple that had stood for generations came down stone by stone. Exactly as he said. The withered tree was waiting for them the next morning, dead from the roots to the crown. The disciples stood before it stunned, finally beginning to understand what they had witnessed. Death had not come from outside. It had originated deep underground where no one thought to look. From the curse of the tree to the fall of the temple, 40 years. One seamless prophecy. History confirmed what the Messiah declared in a single moment beside a dusty road. The ash settled. The silence that followed was the loudest sermon Jerusalem had ever heard. From the ancient ruins, the question travels forward across every century straight to our moment. The tree and the temple told one story. And that story was never only about the past. Here's where the story stops being history and starts becoming uncomfortably personal. How easy is it to build a profile that looks exactly like a thriving life of faith? The worship playlist is carefully curated. The aesthetic is polished. The signal is strong. The church attendance is consistent. The vocabulary is correct. The performance is convincing. From the outside, the congregation looks like a forest full of leaves and spiritual life. We have learned to speak the language of faith fluently without always living its substance. The leafy tree of the first century looks remarkably familiar when you hold up the mirror today. If Jesus walked through the doors of your church this Sunday, what exactly would he find? He is not impressed by the building, the branding, the production, or the crowd size. He is looking for justice, the real, costly, uncomfortable kind that changes how you spend Tuesday. He is looking for mercy that costs you something more than a social media post at Christmas. He is looking for genuine faith, not the performance of it, but the living root of it. The pagam is the thing that cannot be staged, rehearsed, or photographed for an audience. Fruit does not grow from a branch that is merely near the vine. It must be connected to it. A disconnected branch can look healthy for a season, but the drying begins from the inside out. The disciples were fooled because they only looked at what was visible and impressive from outside. Jesus was not fooled for a single second, because he always looks further than the surface allows. There is a profound difference between performing prayer and being transformed by it over time. The tree looked completely fine to every observer, right up until the morning it did not. Impressive on the outside, empty at the center. That is the anatomy of religious performance. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, these are not decorations. They are the evidence of life. The question is not whether you attend. The question is what is actually happening in the roots. Those eyes that saw through every layer of the temple see through every layer of your life too. If he walked into your daily life today, not your Sunday life, what would he actually find there? There are two roads. One is covered in impressive leaves. The other is covered in honest fruit. But notice what Jesus does not do. He does not leave them standing beside a dead tree. He pivots immediately to one of the most powerful invitations in the entire gospel record. Even faith as small and fragile as a single mustard seed can move what seems immovable. The roots that sustain real life grow in the dark, unseen, through years of faithful seeking. He is not calling you to perform better. He is calling you to stay genuinely connected to him. The temple was torn down so that something no stone wall could ever contain might be released. The cross is the ultimate fruit, the life poured out so that dead branches could live again. Genuine prayer does not build an image. It builds a root system that holds when everything shakes. And from those roots, fruit appears, not for display, but because it cannot help but grow. You were never meant to bear fruit alone. The whole design depends on being part of a community. Patience grown through real waiting. Honesty that costs something. Forgiveness that heals wounds. There is a moment when you stop performing and simply turn your face toward what is actually real. This is what a life of genuine faith looks like, not perfect, but rooted and honestly fruitful. Do not settle for leaves. Do not be satisfied with the signal. Bear the fruit that only roots can produce. The sun rises over Jerusalem again, and the invitation is still open. What will you do with it?